Hello, welcome back to another episode of Calls with Your Kinky Bestie. This episode is all about ADHD and submission. And just a little disclaimer before we get into this. I'm obviously not a doctor. I am just a person who happens to be a submissive and happens to have ADHD, sharing a little bit about my personal experience. So, if you don't already know, hello, my name is Emma. I'm a submissive. I'm also a mentor for other submissive people in the kink space. And this is a little bit about my history with ADHD, how that impacted my history with submission, kind of the struggles I faced with just both of these little pieces being intertwined. And I'm also going to be sharing my reasons for why BDSM is so helpful for me as a person with this condition. I don't know if condition is the right word. So this is obviously going to be a very personal episode. I'm just going to share all the things. I won't get too deep into like tips and tricks for this episode. Obviously, that just is not it's not the vibe here. I'm hoping to get into that a little bit later. Right now, I'm just going to be kind of sharing, my story with ADHD, how it has impacted me sexually, and why submission is helping me bridge the gaps to all these parts. So, starting off, I'm going to talk about my history with getting diagnosed with ADHD and what that was like. Essentially, I have been in therapy for a very long time. I kind of had a tumultuous upbringing, which resulted in me starting therapy at I think the age of maybe 12, maybe 14. I don't even remember, but it was pretty early on in my life. And at that time, there were so many other things going on, like recent traumas and also just a pretty high anxiety that basically made ADHD not even a topic of conversation. I had at least two therapists tell me just out of the blue in the course of whatever else we were talking about, mentioned to me that it sounded like I had a lot of the you know symptoms of someone with ADHD, but that because I was doing okay in school, like I was, pretty high grade earner through, I think I was in middle school at the time, and even through high school, I was pretty successful educationally, so that it just wasn't going to be a priority or something that really was talked about. Um, It only became a really pertinent issue later in life as I was in higher education, in college, that I was really struggling to stay focused and get my assignments done, get the grades I needed to complete my degree, even though I was in a program that really was rewarding and engaging for me. Also, having ADHD throughout college, I think, was one of the main reasons that caused me to switch majors. I had started in a major that, honestly, I think if I didn't have ADHD, it was really like technical and logical. I could have completed and gone through those 4 years with not as much friction as I ended up going through it. But because I was having such a hard time just staying engaged in something that wasn't wholly entertaining and exciting for me in every piece of the process, I just couldn't do it. I had to find something that was a little bit more like dopamine rewarding for me. So because I was having such a hard time in school, I decided that I really wanted to start taking this seriously. I knew that therapists had mentioned to me that I had ADHD, and it was the symptoms of ADHD that I was really struggling with that I wanted to find solutions for. I really especially wanted to just try out medication and see if that would help me. And I just wanted to have all the facts. There's nothing wrong with knowing more about yourself. And if you suspect, you might have something going on, what's the harm in going down that route? Maybe you'll learn that you don't have mental illness. Um, but oh well, it's just as you learning more about yourself. Even in the process of getting diagnosed for ADHD, I learned more about my anxiety, which was helpful for me also. So obviously, getting diagnosed as an adult is a lot more challenging than getting diagnosed with an attention disorder than as a child. So I had a little bit of family history with it, like my brother, and I think some extraneous family members. But because I was seeking this diagnosis as an adult, it was just really hard finding a doctor who was willing and able to do the testing to begin with. Especially as I was in college, I tried a little bit going down that route of, using the medical tools that were offered to me through my school to get diagnosed. And wow, that just was not the move at all. There just is a lot of time wasting and wait lists. And I remember requesting to get on a wait list for neurological testing because that was what was told to me during an appointment that I was trying to get diagnosed with ADHD at my school. I was told that to try medication, I would need to have neurological testing. I requested to be on that wait list. I literally never even got a call back. And this was years ago at this point. So it just is, unfortunately, there's a lot of hurdles in this process. And there's a reason why there's this saying in the ADHD community that part of, being diagnosed with ADHD is having a hard time even getting an appointment to do so. Like, you really have to be able to be persistent and show up to those appointments and follow up on emails and calls. And, you have to follow this thread through to the end, which is really hard for people that, have a difficulty staying focused and completing, executive tasks like calling people, like showing up to appointments, like sending emails and doing research and all of those types of things. So eventually I was able to get diagnosed, but even that in that process, just anxiety kept coming up. Like, I remember the diagnosis that I got back was basically like, actually, you really have anxiety. But yeah, you have ADHD too, which I just thought was so funny that it was such a small part of my diagnosis, even though that was like the primary reason that I had, sought that out. Um, I actually learned recently that about 50% of adults that have ADHD have anxiety as well. So it's not just me, they're intertwined, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, depending on how the symptoms play out for you. So a little bit about how my ADHD symptoms have affected me sexually and in adult relationships. Um, I've always been really hypersensitive to both physical touch and also just emotionally. Um, I mean, when I was in middle school, if someone just raised their voice to me, I would start crying. I've always been super sensitive to even touch, like tickling. A lot of my genital areas, I'm also really sensitive to touch, to the point where sometimes it's even like painful or uncomfortable to be touched. I also am really distractible, so that, makes sometimes maintaining concentration during sex and relationships challenging. I also, as I was finding out about BDSM and submission, hyperfocusing is another symptom of ADHD. You've probably heard the term sub frenzy, which is basically like, oh, whenever you first figure out that you're a sub, it's really easy to go into the spiral of learning everything you possibly can about it and kind of making it your whole identity and your whole life. And as a person whose ADHD manifests as sometimes like hyperfixating on like new hobbies, that really was like times 10 for me. I feel like maybe you can relate to that too if you're listening to this. I also have really frequent mood shifts as one of my symptoms, to the point where whenever I was getting diagnosed, I also was meeting a lot of the distinctuator, I don't know, for bipolar. And I had to have that ruled out as part of my diagnosis because my mood shifts can be like so severe. And another thing that I faced, especially while dating in BDSM, is sensitivity to rejection. So a lot of people with ADHD have a lot of, history of being rejected or criticized for their identity, especially like earlier on in life, for being, a little bit of outsiders, obscure people with like strange interests. And that really just permeated on into my adult life and into my dating life as well. And I think, especially for kinky people, you face rejection on such a different scale that now, man, I just really want to support people that are going through the process of dating while being kinky, because you face it so much. And a lot of us do have ADHD, and it's really hard. So, another kind of strange symptom that I have not really heard a lot of people talk about this with ADHD, but another symptom that can come up is having a really hard time orgasming. So I actually thought that I was anorgasmic, like totally unable to orgasm, until I had my first orgasm at the age of 21. Yup, I'm not kidding. A lot of people would ask me, "Oh, are you sure you can't even orgasm when you're alone and masturbating?" Nope, I had not orgasmed at all until that age. Even though I had been sexually active for years, I had been using tons of toys and doing lots of kinky play. Even that level of stimulation was not enough for me to orgasm until that age, when I finally found one toy that like literally stimulates you three ways at once, and that was finally able to like push me over the edge. So, a little bit about how BDSM has really been a big draw for me because of all of these symptoms. A big one for me is the increased stimulation with kinky play. So, because I'm able to, and there's also a lot of variety in the type of play that you're having, that really just keeps things entertaining and engaging, because with kink, it's really easy to be constantly mixing things up, discovering something totally new and bringing into the bedroom, playing with toys and tools that stimulate you in different ways. And also just the level of doing things that are taboo is kind of more exciting and stimulating. So that's been a big one for me. I'm also find myself really drawn to structure and rewards that BDSM offers. So in a lot of traditional relationships, you're not going to have necessarily a partner that's, keeping you to your personal goals and staying on top of you and rewarding you in small ways. In most relationships, you're kind of expected to, you do your thing, I'll do mine, and we'll come together for like the dating and bedroom stuff. And I do still think that is part of a healthy relationship. At least that's part of my healthy relationship, is having that like space and freedom apart from each other. But it is really special that whenever we come together, my dom is able to provide me with a little bit of structure and kind of call me on my crap when I'm slacking. And if I asked him to, would be 100% there to, give me the whatever little rewards or punishment that I asked for to help me along this journey. So, and kind of another big one that has been, my draw towards BDSM is obviously, as I have this draw to different types of play and physical stimulation that is not always vanilla. As someone who is really sensitive to rejection, if I'm with a partner who is not into that type of play, or just someone who is vanilla in general, face it's really easy for these people with really good intentions to criticize you or criticize the type of play that you're doing. I've even had the experience where I haven't told someone my kink, but then they criticize, anal play around me. And if you're really sensitive to rejection, this can feel like a personal attack. It's not fun to be, criticized over the way you complete tasks or the way that you exist as a human. But especially being criticized for like what gives you sexual gratification, it's really hurtful, especially if you're someone who is hypersensitive to it. So I've noticed that if I am with or trying to be with someone who is not kind of on this kinky level playing this game with me or with anyone, if I'm noticing this type of criticism or experiencing it towards me personally, I can try to morph my interests and kind of like hide my desires as like a way of people pleasing, to like kind of hide my true self from them, to like protect myself from that rejection. But it still is going to be eating me up deep down, of course. So finding people who are accepting of this kink play by finding people that are into it and already participating in this is really like crucial and critical for me and my just emotional well-being, because I'm not able to fully be intimate with someone who is going to be criticizing the way that I experience intimacy and what I like, of course. So I hope this overview was helpful. I would love to hear from other people what symptoms you have with ADHD that impact your sexuality, and how other people use BDSM as kind of like a tool to ease these symptoms up a little bit. I know, especially in recent years, ADHD has kind of been a trending topic, and that's part of the reason why I was able to learn so much about it and get diagnosed myself. So I'm really grateful for this kind of transition towards just like more mental illness awareness. And I think that there's also a case where even if you don't think you have ADHD, haven't been diagnosed, whatever it is, if you're still experiencing these symptoms, sure, maybe you don't meet enough symptoms to check off a box and, properly classify yourself as an ADHD person or whatever. I don't understand people gatekeeping mental illness. If you're experiencing symptoms that are negatively impacting your life, and if they are related to your sexuality, why not take advantage of all of these resources coming out about, if you're hyperfixating on sexuality and subfrenzy as a person with ADHD, here are tips to help. I think if you're facing a problem, you should definitely be looking for answers to ease your life, because this is what this is all about, baby. This is about ease and flow and finding systems that work for you. So ignore the label. You kind of just have to ignore the label sometimes. If you're experiencing these symptoms, there's no shame. I think you should be consuming this content that has answers for them. So try not to get hung up on that if you can't. Obviously, it's one thing to claim you have ADHD if you know that you don't, but I think for a lot of people who are just learning about this and noticing that they have these, negative symptoms going on in their life that are related to this mental illness, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to learn more about it and using tips and tools for people with ADHD also. So thanks so much for listening. If you're not already, get on my email list. I'm going to send a little wrap up for this week email out about tools and all the stuff that I post about this throughout the week. I'm probably going to create a blog post and a couple posts on Instagram also chatting about this. Follow me on Instagram, of course, if you're not already. My @ is kinkybestie. And my website to sign up for those emails is kinkybestie.com. That's KINKYBESTIE. Thank you again. Bye.